Welcome to Behind the Screens, Conversations with Background Screening Pros. I'm Les Rosen, your host, and I'm excited to have you here. On this podcast, we chat with the people who know the background screening world inside and out. Executives, industry experts, legal pros, and more. We dive into their personal stories and insights to give you a real look at what's happening behind the scenes. Whether you work in the screening industry or are just curious, Behind the Screens bring you the real, unfiltered conversations from the people who make it all happen. Stick around for stories you won't hear anywhere else. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Screens, Conversation with Background Screening Pros. Of course, as always, our special thanks to Barry Nixon and the Pre-Employment Directory, publishers of the Background Buzz, who are the primary sponsor. And today, it's a real privilege to have with me a longtime friend and compatriot, a person that I have listened to for many hours at PBSA webinars and read a number of articles. Mr. Scott Paler, Esquire, attorney at law, a distinguished member of the Bar of Wisconsin and Illinois. And Scott, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Les. This is fun. It's great to be with you.
Well, you know, I've known you for a long time. I've followed you. I've listened to you. I just reread your LinkedIn profile and saw you had 57 articles. You just told me off camera. You stopped counting in 2017, or 57 articles and presentations. So let's start with, what are you doing now? And what do you find most interesting about your current role?
Yeah, so I'm an attorney and partner at DeWitt. And DeWitt is about a 140 attorney firm located in the upper Midwest. And I chair our background screening practice group at DeWitt. So it's not just me here. There are other partners and associates that help me to work with folks in the background screening space. And so we work with background screening companies, we work with data providers, we work with end users, we work with software platforms in the space. And I would say I primarily spend my day helping in one of three ways. So I get day-to-day calls and emails from lots of different folks asking one-off questions about how they should do something. So, you know, today I got a question from a client trying to figure out if they should report something under California law. And another client was trying to figure out how to handle a messy exclusion situation. So we get those types of calls and emails, and I do my best to help with those.
So that's the day-to-day compliance issue. What do we do with this position?
That's the day-to-day.
Right.
Yep.
And what's the other two things?
Do a lot of project work. So do a lot of help with contract negotiations, and then also help folks put together dispute resolution processes, full file templates, end user contracts, and a host of other items that are designed to sort of fulfill the compliance and risk management requirements in the space. And then the third way I help is on the lawsuit side or on the demand letter side. So helping our clients to work through those types of issues, which everyone hopes doesn't crop up, but they're inevitable at some point.
Demand, you mean from consumers?
Yeah, from consumers or their attorneys, right?
Well, tell us about your path there. I mean, not every lawyer wakes up their first day of law school and says, well, out of all the areas of law, I'm going to not only choose employment law, but I'm going to chair the background screening. What is your path to bring you into the world of pre-employment background screening?
Yes, I don't know about you, Les, but I don't know anyone who comes out of law school and says, I know what I want to do. I want to be a background screening attorney. I don't think I've ever heard that before. And it certainly wasn't true for me. I didn't know anything about background screening coming out of law school. But I interviewed at a number of different law firms and ended up at Seyfarth Shaw in Chicago, which many folks in the industry are familiar with. At that time, at the very beginning, I was trying to find work sources. And one of the easiest ways to find work sources is to have some common connection with a partner. And so I reached out to other University of Wisconsin law graduates, and one of them was named Greg Davis. And Greg Davis, as you might remember, was involved in some of the early versions of PBSA, NAPBS at that time, and had a background screening practice. And helping him to support that background screening practice was a senior associate named Pam Devada. And so I came into Seyfarth and helped with some research and other basic things for Greg and for Pam. And then Greg ended up leaving for an in-house opportunity, and Pam sort of took over his practice at that time. And I more or less became her chief lieutenant and sort of covered things while she went on maternity leave and did my best to handle things then. And then about 4 years into my time at DeWitt, I decided it was time for me to head back home with my wife to Wisconsin. We're both from Wisconsin, and our plan was sort of to return when we started having a family. And so we came back to Wisconsin, and I'll be honest, Les, I really thought that might be the end of my road in the background screening space. There aren't many firms in Wisconsin that have anything to do with background screening. But a couple clients decided to seek me out and come with me to DeWitt, just small clients at the time. And that was enough to keep me in. I said, if I'm going to service them well, I need to stay on top of things. So I'm going to go to the PBSA conferences and keep going. And then after a year, I said, well, if I'm going to go to the PBSA conferences, I might as well try to speak. I might as well try to make my time useful. And then it just really continued from there. I continued to speak, and clients decided to come my way. And, the more I did it, the more I loved it. And it sort of just took off from there.
And I remember Greg, the last time I saw him actually was at the PBSA, then NAPBS conference in Nashville, and he had just decided to go in-house. I recall talking to him about making that transition. So, wow, what a wild, wacky road you have followed. Right?
You never know, right?
You never know. It's true. You got to law school, and it's like, I'll take any job, and you end up going down a career path. Sometimes it's arbitrary and capricious, but usually it works out. Oh, that's great. Well, now that you've been involved in the background screening world, and you obviously are a featured speaker and a much sought after speaker at the PBSA conferences, and you always have these wonderful topics where people get all sorts of help in what they need to do. What's been the most exciting or thing about your career in background screening that you like the most? What do you like about it? Because you're doing it, so I assume you like it.
Yeah, I definitely like it. Well, I think I'd start with the people, Les. I think people in the background screening industry are just consistently decent, right? They're always grateful. They're gracious. They're thinkers. They're trying to figure out how to do things correctly. And I've just gravitated towards the people. And I will tell you, too, that when I have hosted conferences here in Madison and had some of my colleagues join me at those conferences and interacted with our clients from all over the place, they always come back and say, God, everyone's nice. There's just this thing. I think the special thing about this industry that stuck out to me and that really kept me involved. So that's one thing for sure. But I think another part of it is that it's just a complex area. As you know, Les, there's the federal laws, there's the state laws, there's the local laws, there's the agency interpretations, right? There's the opinion letters that may or may not matter. There's so much that evolves. And so I think there's always sort of interest for me in trying to figure out the answer to the question, which is, where are we now? Right? So I know where we were, but where are we now? Does this change it or not?
And sometimes where are we going? And all you can do is extrapolate from what we know now and make your best guess, right?
100%. And I think, just like you, Les, I like the strategy aspect of it. I think it's really fun to try to come up with a strategy that balances both the legal and the business as best we can.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So the part of what you've done, obviously, is talk at PBSA and help untold numbers of screeners and providers with some things might seem basic to you, but to a person who hasn't gone to law school, this stuff is complex, and it's just a lot of moving parts. So what role has PBSA played in your career in terms of furthering or being the involvement that you've had?
Yeah, I think PBSA has played a huge role for me. So I think I've attended, I'm sure it's over 30 conferences at this point. And so I think it's been tremendous in bringing me in touch with, both existing clients and new clients, and also just contacts and friends in the space, and the chance to interact with people from all over the country twice a year has been an exceptional opportunity, and I'm grateful to PBSA for that. So that for sure. I think a second thing for me is that, it gives me an opportunity to listen to other, industry experts and attorneys in the space that I respect and hear their point of view. And there's so many people that I value the chance to listen to and to learn from. And so it's been great from that standpoint. And then PBSA has given me a number of leadership opportunities. I've been on, the co-chair of the litigation avoidance committee. I've been on the ethics committee. I started an insurance task force. And so it's given me an opportunity to have some leadership opportunities, and I've enjoyed those as well.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's so interesting how the industry, and we may go more into this, has changed. But, the very first conference was put on by Steve Brownstein back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I would be the person who gave the legal lecture. And in about 2 hours, I could cover everything there was to cover. Summarize the FCRA, summarize important state laws, summarize all the litigation that was currently out there and cases, and go through the FTC letters. It took 2 hours. Now you go to a conference, you'll have 30 attorneys and covering a small portion. So it's just been like a nuclear explosion of compliance. What's your take on that? It's obviously not going to get any better.
I totally agree. I mean, I can't tell you how often I say to people, when I started in this area, almost 20 years ago, you could get away with X, Y, and Z, and the chances that anyone would ever call you on it was next to zero.
Right.
And although a lot of the same laws are on the books, the risk management environment is just totally different.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't think it's getting easier.
Yeah, I mean, without trying to get too much into the substance, what do you recommend to someone who's trying to wrap their head around this? Because it's just, if you really think about all the moving parts and all the rules and regulations on this, I mean, your head can explode. I mean, how do you sleep at night?
Your head can definitely explode. Yeah, I was chatting with a new client last week that doesn't have anyone on staff that has pre-existing experience in the background screening area. And one of the things I always mention to folks when they don't have experience is that this is not the easiest area in which to start a business, right? The regulations loom large and they're complicated and it's tough to get things right. And there's a serious learning curve. And so I always recommend to people to consider, if the budget is available, to consider bringing someone onto staff that has pre-existing experience in the space. But, absent that, I think it's all about going to the PBSA conferences. I think it's aligning with an attorney that they can trust and that, whose voice resonates with them. And then I think it's continuing to look at, for resources, both in paper and in electronic form, that can try to help keep things up to date on their end.
Yeah, I agree. I have said several times to people that screening has now become a compliance industry. You can now get software off the shelf. You can, things that before were difficult production-wise are now easier with third-party software and integrations with ATSs and suppliers. But compliance always remains a sort of barrier to entry. So it's just nuts out there. So let's leave the wild, wonderful, wacky world of background screening and exploding heads and everything that keeps you up in the middle of the night. Let's talk about you. Yeah. What do you do out when you're not trying to keep people from getting sued? Tell us about your hobbies, your interests, your things outside of work. Like, what do you do for fun? Tell us about Scott Paler.
Sure. Well, outside of work, it's usually about my family. So my wife and I have 14 and 16-year-old girls who keep us very busy. My 16-year-old's learning to drive, and my 14-year-old is playing soccer just about nonstop all over the place.
Oh, and fantastic.
So most of the time when I'm not here, I am with them. So they're great. So they're a huge part of my day.
By the way, are you in the soccer parent tournament of soccer here? Then 100 miles away, and there's just tournaments every weekend, right? And not to mention practice during the week.
Yep. I think we went through a month recently where I spent more time in the Appleton and Green Bay area, which is about 2.5 hours from Madison than I did in Madison. So yes, those soccer tournaments, they definitely have us driving quite a bit.
And then living and dying with each game and each tournament and
a
having a room
hundred.
full of trophies someplace.
That's right. But my 14-year-old Les, she just absolutely loves it.
Oh,
She
that's great.
loves it. And so I think, it could be anything, but to watch her do something that she loves like that is a treat.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And do you have any other special hobbies that when you're not, a soccer parent that you
You
do
bet.
also indulge in when you have a moment or two of free time?
Yeah, so I'm a huge sports fan, Les. So all the Wisconsin teams, the Packers, the Badgers, the Brewers, the Bucks. I spend a lot of time watching my teams play, which is fun.
The Packers, is that a professional team or used?
Yep,
Oh, I'm just
that's the professional team. Yep, yep, yep. Now we're not going to talk about yesterday's game because that didn't go too well
right.
for us. But hopefully, as the season moves along, they'll shape up. But yeah, I love doing that. And my wife's family has had season tickets to the Packers for 60 years, and so we get to go a few times a year to see the Packers play. So that's fun. So and I enjoy doing that, and then we try to travel. So we've spent a lot of time going down to Mexico, particularly Puerto Vallarta. We love
Oh,
taking
nice.
beach vacations there and then travel too when we can. So I think we're heading to Italy in the spring. So that's what we're feverishly trying to plan right now.
Italy in the spring, and you're not taking me?
Hey, you want to join us, Les? We'd love to have you.
Where are you going in Italy? I got to know. It's my favorite destination.
Oh, it's mine too. I think on this one, so our girls have not been there before. So I think we're going to hit the usual haunts. We're going to go to Rome, Florence, and Venice.
Oh, okay. Let's start with the big three.
Start with the big three. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow.
Do you have recommendations for us?
Yeah, stay there as long as you can. Right. That's my only recommendation. I mean, in Italy, it doesn't matter if you go left or right, you're going to see something fantastic. So just take any highway going, any region or any city. And
It's unbelievable. My wife and I actually spent a semester there while we were in law school.
Oh.
I'm not sure how we finagled that, but we did. And so this is actually going to be our first time back since we spent
Well, that's
4 months.
fantastic. What city? Bologna or Rome or?
We were in Florence and we went to school just outside of Florence.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a lot of fun. Law school the right way, Les.
So you're in striking distance of Lucca and San Girolamo and Siena and wherever you wanted to go, you could go.
Yes, don't tell anyone, but we just scheduled our classes to be as compact as possible so that we could spend the rest of the week traveling.
Well, that's fantastic, Scott. Well, yeah, you're living my life. That's great. So is there anything about us, any secret Scott Paler stories that people may not know about you or suspect about you?
What's the secret story? Well, it's funny. I was telling this one the other day. So when I was in high school, I took a few trips to Washington, D.C. as part of like the typical student contingent.
Right.
And so we toured the Senate office buildings, and then we stopped at the Senate office building cafeteria for lunch, right? So it was a very long line, and we waited about a half an hour to make our way to the front. And I happened to start chatting with a grandmother-looking lady that was right next to me in line, and we were going back and forth, and she was very sweet. And all of a sudden I started to notice that like people were looking at us, or it seemed like they were looking at us, and they were starting to whisper. And I'm like, I must be misreading things. I can't imagine what that would be. But they kept doing it. And, I finished my conversation with her, and then someone came over and they said, well, that was really cool, wasn't it? And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, don't you know who that was? And I said, no. And they said, well, that's Dr. Ruth. and I said, I was 18. I said, who's Dr. Ruth? So that was a fun one. That was a fun one. I had to do my homework after that trip to figure out who that was. Yeah.
So you got the famous Navy bean soup. You got some advice from Dr. Ruth, or
That's right. That's right.
That's great. All right. I haven't really asked people about celebrity sightings. That's a pretty good one. Right.
Yeah. That was colorful. That was colorful.
Oh, that's good. That's great. So a few more questions. Maybe you've already alluded to this a little bit, but in your career in the background screening industry, what do you think? Just top of your head, answer the biggest change you've seen from when you started back in the day at Seyfarth and with Pam and Greg and up to now. What's kind of like the biggest seismic or global change you've seen?
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of changes. I mean, I think one of the ones that stands out the most is the transition from a database heavy criminal background check to one that's a whole lot more nuanced and a whole lot more on the ground at the courthouse level. I think at the end of the day, trying to get accuracy right on the criminal side is probably the most important compliance item today. And I think the methodology to achieve that continues to evolve. So I think
that's interesting. On one hand, a lot of people in the industry just want to make it a data-driven industry. On the other hand, you're seeing that, no, we have to talk about individualized assessment. We have to there's fair chance hiring laws. There's clean slate laws. It's like these two opposing forces. One force it's all data-driven, AI-driven, push of a button, computer-driven, no humans involved. On the other hand, no, it's all about the person. And if you get the hit, you really got to go deep into that person with some real good, accurate information.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think we see a tension in our world, and it's certainly true in the background screening area right now, where we're trying to figure out the right balance between consistency and automation on the one hand, and between individualized inquiries and nuanced approaches on the other. And I think that there is very much a tension there, and we haven't, as a society, figured out the right balance yet. And so I think we're going to continue to sort of muddle through until we hopefully arrive at some sort of equilibrium.
And unfortunately, or a lot of that muddling occurs in courtrooms and with litigation. Right.
Unfortunately, but yeah.
That's how we tend to muddle, right? Judges muddle and meddle, and we finally come up with national kind of consensus best practices.
That's sort of we develop those guideposts and those signposts often through other people's business tragedies.
Yeah, and you just hope you're not the sacrificial lamb, right? You'd rather go to PBSA and hear what happened to others. But I guess it's true now. I mean, I don't know how, in quote unquote the old days, which wasn't that long ago. A lot of firms could say, "Oh, we've never been sued" or whatever. I don't know anyone can say that anymore. I mean, there's just so much out there.
Yeah, I think there is so much out there. I think that, plaintiffs' firms, there are at least a half dozen that have developed a cottage industry in the space and have been very successful with it. Mm-hmm. And they're certainly attracting other plaintiffs' firms as well because they see the success and are gravitating towards it. And so I think with more and more folks out there that are paying attention to this area, there's sort of an inevitability to it that, eventually your volume is going to catch up with you. And I think, I'm always encouraging people, do what you reasonably can, right? You're probably not going to avoid it forever, but do what you reasonably can to make it less frequent and to hopefully keep the dollar amounts on the ones that do come through.
Yeah. It's turned out to be an industry not for the faint-hearted when it comes to that part. Well, we don't want to depress people completely. So,
No.
It's still a great industry. A lot of people are in it and doing remarkable jobs and working hard. So given your perspective, and you've seen and worked with lots of screeners and providers and lots of people in this space, if someone came to you and said, I've always wanted to be a background screener, or I'm thinking of it, or I'm 2 or 3 years in, and should I stay in this industry or should I go elsewhere? What's your advice in terms of getting into the industry or staying in or advancing? What would you share with people?
I still think it's a great industry to be in. I think the fact that companies around the country are running background checks in a huge number of contexts means that the business opportunities are going to be there. And I also think that screeners continue to get better at what they do. But like you suggested, Les, it's not for the faint of heart either. I think that there is a learning curve involved, and that I would only encourage folks to jump into this industry or to stay in the industry if they're comfortable with that learning curve. And if they're comfortable trying to balance risk and reward in the ways that we have to do here. So I still think it's great, but you sort of want to go in with your eyes open too.
And I think if I understand you right, you also have to be you have to have curiosity about compliance and willing to take on that challenge and learn about it and go to PBSA and read articles and listen to people such as yourselves and come up with something to have your best shot at providing the service profitably, but staying out of court.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's always funny to talk to people after their first PBSA because they feel like they just drank out of a fire hose and it's overwhelming. And then you talk to them after a few more and they're like, yeah, there's still a lot to learn, but I don't feel quite as overwhelmed. And then you talk
Yeah.
to them a few more after that and they're like, well, I definitely picked up a few things, but it's not overwhelming to me anymore. And I feel like that's sort of how it goes, that if you're willing to put in the time and listen, then there's a lot of information to learn and easy ways to get better.
Yeah, so as long as you have processes and procedures in place and you learn about them. And, well, real quick, I mean, and we don't want to get too bogged down with substance here, but looking at Scott Paler's crystal ball, what do you think the future holds? What are you predicting or projecting?
I think that the industry is going to continue to be pressed on the compliance side and is going to continue to have to try to strike the right balance between compliance and revenue goals. But I do think that there is a reasonable balance to be struck. I think the challenge is to continue to absorb these changes in laws and these developing decisions and to figure out how and when to pivot. But I do think that the industry is going to continue to do well and likely even better because there is a premium now on making sure people in all different spaces know who they are doing business with.
And what about your own future? What do you see yourself doing? And the classic interview question, Scott, where are you going to be in 10 years? PBSA, right?
Yeah, President of the United States? Is that no.
Why not?
I have a feeling I'll be doing this. I think, I love what I'm doing. It's great that I have a job that on Sunday night, I'm not sweating the Mondays. I think.
Oh, that's great. That's a good way of putting it. You're not Sunday night. You're not sweating the Mondays.
That's right. At the end of the day, I feel like I get to channel my parents. My mom spent many decades as a second grade teacher, and my dad was an entrepreneur. And so I sort of get to channel both of them. I get to spend a lot of my day teaching, which I really enjoy.
Oh, that's nice.
And I get to spend a lot of my day trying to balance risk and reward like my dad all of those years.
Did I understand a few minutes ago when you were in Italy with your wife, were you both in law school? Is she a lawyer as well, or?
She is, yes.
Well, I had to finish. What's it like having a 2-lawyer family?
So somehow it works for us, Les. I can imagine others might have some challenges, but somehow it works for us. But I would tell you, we have great conversations. My wife and I always have plenty to talk about. And I guess 17 years of marriage and 21 years of being together, we haven't run out of things to chat about. So we'll take that as a good thing.
Oh, Scott, well, that's fantastic to hear. Well, folks, we've been hearing from Scott Paler, attorney, father, husband, lawyer extraordinaire. Scott, we're about to close out. Any last little bits of advice or anything else you want to share before we end this episode? The mic is all yours.
I would just say, I would just say, keep fighting the good fight, everyone. I'm certainly in your corner. And Les, thanks for doing this. When I mentioned to my 2 daughters that you had asked if I'd be willing to participate in this podcast, they asked if you really meant to invite me.
All right.
So thank you for doing me the honor of giving me the chance to talk to you.
Well, and actually, if I had realized you were going to Italy in the spring, I would have actually scheduled this after Italy, and the whole half hour would have been about Italy. But right.
We can regroup in the spring, do part 2.
Right. Well, that's great, folks. You've been listening to Scott Paler, and with that, let me once again thank the pre-employment directory and the background buzz, and Scott, a great guest, and look forward to seeing you at more PBSA conferences. Appreciate it, man.
Good to see you, Les.
Take care. All right, that was yet another wonderful conversation with a background screening pro. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an update. And hey, if you got a moment, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It really helps get the word out. For more info or to catch up on past episodes, or to make suggestions or to suggest possible future guests, head over to our website. Once again, this is your host, Les Rosen, and it's been a pleasure to bring you another episode. See you on the next episode. Thanks.